Hey guys, this is Clint coming to you with part 4 of my sit and go series. And as you can see, the title here is to shove or not to shove. That is the question. We're not doing Shakespeare by any means today. We are analyzing your standard shove all in spots. 10 big blind shoves, 11 big blind shoves. What the types of hands that typical players will analyze in sit and go wizard, and it's going to spit out an ICM calculation and tell you whether you made a good shove or a bad shove. Well, we're going to go a step further and say, hey, do we have to shove at all? So that's what we're looking at today. I will say this is one element that I added to my game that definitely changed how I approach the push-fold game, or lack thereof, I should say. So why don't we jump right on into it? So, as I said, we're going to be looking at your standard shoving scenarios. You have 10 big blinds, you're on the button in the small blind. Looks like a very standard all-in spot. And we're going to do what we've been doing, like in the past several videos that I've done, analyzing what's the plus EV play versus what's the optimal play. And that's really what we're after, is the optimal play, because as you'll see in this video, the optimal play might be 3 or 4 times as more profitable as the standard plus EV numbers that you may be getting from your ICM calculators. And of course, this will have to absolutely do with exploiting regs, as we've talked a lot about in previous videos. So, the best way to approach this and to talk about the strategy is really to just jump right into examples. So, as I said, we're going to be looking at spots where it's going to be folded to us. We've got 10 to 12 big blinds, and it looks like a standard shove. And we're going to do some comparing and contrasting versus different plays we can make to figure out what's the best play so that you can take it to the games and start playing a more optimal game and bump up that ROI. So let's look at this first example we have here. And this is from the button. And to keep calculations simple, we're going to be using a standard 9-man game. And in this example, we have a 9-man game, 7 players left, blinds are at 5,100, and we're going to be on the button. And we're going to have 12 big blinds, so we have a 1,200 stack on the button with ace-5 suited. You've got the small blind there, sitting with a little bit less than 10 big blinds at 950, and the big blind who's got you covered by a little bit here at 1,250, so 12.5 big blinds. This specific example that I'm using was actually brought up in one of my Skype group chats, and everybody was saying standard shove, standard shove, standard shove. And you know what? It absolutely is a standard shove, and it's a plus EV shove. But of course, how my mind starts working is, well, is that the only play that we can make? So let's look at some calculations of this. It's a very simple calculation to do with sit and go wizard. And that's what I did here. I just replicated this scenario here in Sit and Go Wizard, took a screenshot, and as you can see, we are 7-handed, folded to us, ace-5 suited, and we're gonna, and I took a screenshot of me folding, but let's just say we're shoving all in. It doesn't really matter for this point right here, because you can see, if you look at the difference between pushing and folding, it's a positive shove. It's 0.18%. And if you look at the calling ranges of the big blind and the small blind, I put in some average ranges, 16.9%, 13.9%. It may be wider, it may be tighter. I actually put them a little bit wider than what Sit and Go Wizard suggested it. I think it was around 10 or 11% the Sit and Go Wizard had. So we're talking about hands like ace-8 off, ace-5 suited they're going to be calling with, king-queen suited, king-queen, pocket fours plus. That's a typical range that we're going to put in for the blinds. Again, you might say maybe they're looser, maybe they're tighter. we're approaching this as if the guys in the blinds are your average ABC regs. They're not going to be exploiting too much. They're just playing your standard game plus EV type of game. So as you can see here, and when putting this in here, shoving ace-5 suited from the button is a plus EV shove. And if you were analyzing this game or this hand from one of your games and you put this into sit and go whiz, you would be pretty happy to say, hey, I made a plus EV shove. But while you're making a plus EV shove, maybe what we should be thinking about is there anything else we can do here to not just have a 0.18% dollar EV number here? Can we make that even more profitable? So I am going to use another tool which you've seen in previous videos, and that's Cardrunners EV. And what we're going to be looking at in that program is, what about raise folding? What about raise calling? How about those as options? I know the idea of just raising when you have 12 or 11 big blinds is, it's not in many players' repertoire while they're playing. Once they hit 12 big blinds, it's all in or nothing. But what I'm going to be showing you here is we can start raise folding, raise calling with 12 big blinds, with 11 big blinds, with 10 big blinds, and I'll also show you here in another example coming up, we can start raise folding, raise calling all the way down to even 8 and 7 big blinds. We'll get into that, but let's look at this scenario first where we have 12 big blinds. So remember these numbers, 0.18%. That's what the dollar EV play is. It's a profitable shove. Fantastic. Let's take a look at another way to approach this. So I'm going to exit out of here. I'm going to show you the Cardrunners EV program, and again, I replicated this scenario. We've got pretty much the same stacks here, and we are shoving from the button with our 1200 stack, and we don't need to show everybody else folding. We're just showing what happens when with the players involved. So what I did was here, I gave myself ace-5 suited, and instead of shoving all in, I'm going to raise to 220. So 2.2. You want to min raise, you can min raise. I'll just put in 220. Now let's put in for the small blind the same range that he was going to call the all-in with. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you remember, that small blind, the guy in the small blind had right at 10 big blinds, a little bit less than 10 big blinds. So put yourself in the small blind scenario. If you have a button min raise, or a guy raised from the button, and you're sitting there with 10 or 9 big blinds, are you assuming much fold equity, if any, when you're right around 10 or 9 big blinds? Usually no. Usually no. Usually you're going to be 3-bet shoving there, hands that you're comfortable with showing down, because again, you should probably be assuming minimal fold equity at that point. So for this example, that's what we're assuming right now, that the small blind is going to be 3-bet shoving with the same range that he's calling it all in. And that's a very common scenario. So he is going to raise, and we're just going to put his whole stack in there. And we said it was about a 16% range. I think we were ace-8 off, ace-5 suited, maybe, and then king-queen, king-jack suited. I think that's about the range we had there. We can add an ace-7 off. So let's just put this range for right now. It's pretty close to what we had. And if he doesn't pick up one of those hands, he's going to be folding. And the big blind's folding. And in all of these scenarios, what I'm going to be illustrating is we're going to raise fold here. To be honest, raising and calling off a 12 big blind stack with ace-5 suited is really never going to have enough equity to justify it versus your standard 3-betting range, especially the one that we illustrated here. You're pretty much going to be crushed. So we're going to be folding every time we're 3-bet. And once the small blind folds, we've got to give a range to the big blinds. So let's do that. And he was closer to 13%. Pocket pairs. And I think it was just king queen suited there. So he's going to have a slightly tighter range there. And when he doesn't pick up those hands, he's going to be folding. And of course, we're folding every time. So we've just put together a decision tree that when we open with ace-5 suited for just a raise, or let's just say a min raise at this point, and we give the small blind and big blind a 3-bet shoving range pretty much equal to their all-in calling range because they may assume minimal fold equity, we want to figure out, is this more plus EV than what Sit and Go Wizard told us was a plus EV shove? So let's do our calculation of the EV here. And if you remember, the Sit and Go Wizard number was 0.18 for shoving all in, which was profitable. But look at this. Raise folding with ace-5 suited resulted in 0.53%. It's almost 3 times as profitable than shoving all in. And that's the type of stuff we're talking about. So when you have a tighter ABC type of reg to your left, who's not going to flat you, who's not going to be 3-betting you out of control, you're a standard player, raise folding, raise calling can be the more optimal play. Now, we can certainly start playing around with these 3-betting numbers and figure out how wide do they have to 3-bet us for the shove to become more profitable than the raise fold or raise call. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to get into another example, and we're really going to jump into playing around with ranges and figuring out how wide someone has to 3-bet us to make this not profitable and essentially exploit us. Remember, everything we're doing here is extremely exploitable. But if you remember from previous videos, I said it's not if it's exploitable, it's if the players are going to exploit us. And as I said before, 95% of the time, players are not going to exploit you. You know, if they knew we had the potential to raise fold here, sure, they could be 3-betting with an extremely wide range, but that's the point. To exploit this, you have to 3-bet ungodly wide and very, very often. And I'm going to give you another example to illustrate just how wide and just how often they're going to have to do it to make these plays less profitable than your unexploitable shoves. So let's jump back into another example, and I'll also get into, once we're done here with the examples, I'll get into the optimal players to do it against. So of course it's going to be your ABC regs, but having HUD stats will be extremely important to get an idea of just how loose or tight certain players are. And so we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. So let's jump back into it. And so this, again, this standard plus EV shove that everybody in my Skype group was saying, just shove, 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 you can't do anything else. Maybe you start thinking about ways to expand your approach in these games, and that you can do more than just push fold when you have 12 big blinds. Let's take your standard now blind versus blind scenario. The most common scenario I feel that exists in games that everybody seems to talk about is blind versus blind. We're in the small blind. We have 10 big blinds, and most people refer this as the any 2 card shove versus your average reg. And that may be true. It might be any 2 card, but many times we have to shove really wide, and then will the other opponents call us wide? And it can be certainly some dreaded spots here in the blind versus blind game, and actually some marginal edges that sometimes you need to push. But again, we're going to analyze when we are in this very common blind versus blind scenario. We're sitting in the small blind with a 10 big blind stack. The big blind has 10 big blinds. Is it true that all we can do is play, push, or fold, because that's exactly what has been preached in many videos, forums, books, that as soon as you hit this, there's no other play you can make. So let's take a look at a blind versus blind example to see if that is the case. So here again, 9-man sit and go. We're going to be 6-handed this time. Blinds are 100, 200. We're in the small blind, and we're going to give ourselves just a random hand that will be a standard shove for most players. We have King 8 offsuit and 10 big blinds, so we have a 2K stack. The big blind also has 10 big blinds, a 2K stack. Again, standard shove, yes. Very standard shove. Plus EV shove, yes. Profitable shove, absolutely. The most profitable play, maybe not. So let's see what we got. So again, just wanted to illustrate what Sit and Go Wizard is telling us, and you'll see that King 8 offsuit versus, and I gave a calling range to the big blind of a little over 20%. Again, you might think that's wide, you might think that's tight. We're not going to get into discussing metagame, and I know that you know you're shoving any two, so I can call you with whatever. We're just going to take your standard reg who may assume you're shoving wide, and but he's not going to get too crazy. So 20%, and I made sure to get the hands in there that he's going to be calling with. So Ace 4, Ace Deuce suited, King Jack, King 10 suited, Queen Jack suited. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but I think that's an average range there, not too loose, not too tight. So against that range, shoving King 8 suited will be very profitable. Again, this is you and you're analyzing your game. Sit and Go Wizard gives you that green check mark when you look through all your hands, and you're really happy that you made a plus EV shove. So remember this number though, 0.3 there. You'll see the difference between pushing and folding is 0.3%. So very plus EV shove here. Can we do, just like the hand from before, can we do anything different? Can we raise fold with 10 big blinds? You might think I'm crazy for even suggesting that, but what I'm about to argue is that I think we can. So let's go back into our Cardrunners EV program to start analyzing different decisions, and we're really going to delve into this decision about how wide somebody has to 3-bet, and see how profitable race folding or race calling can actually be. So let's see what we got. Alright, so here we are, and I'm going to put in the same exact scenario that I just illustrated. We're sitting in the small blind versus the big blind, both 10 big blind stacks. Blinds are 100, 200. But instead of shoving all in, let's raise. And I'm actually going to put a bigger raise than normal, a 2.5x raise. So we're going to raise to 500. And we're first going to do this with exactly the same hand that we showed before in Sit and Go Wizard. We're going to give ourselves King 8 off. And again, let's say you were in the big blind versus the small blind who just went with 10 big blinds, went to 2.5x. Without any specific read, you have to assume there that you probably don't have any fold equity. And as a matter of fact, you might actually assume if you're in the big blind and the small blind's a reg, you might assume he's actually doing this to induce with aces, kings, queens, because again, the standard play is just to shove all in. So maybe your 3-betting range here, because you feel this is a little bit of a fishy scenario, your 3-betting range might be actually tighter than your all-in calling range. We're not going to, that would obviously be even a better scenario here, but we're not going to even get into that. For right now, we're going to say, again, the big blind's 3-betting range is going to be the same as the all-in calling range, which was about 21%. So we're going to have the big blind shove all in, and we're going to do it with, and I think this was the range, any pocket pair, maybe the 3s. I believe that was our range, 21.1%, so that looks pretty good. Alright, so, and if he doesn't pick up that hand, any one of those hands, he's going to be folding. And what are we going to do? We're going to raise fold here. And we're going to see if this is better than shoving all in. So let's do a quick calculation. And as you can see, the plus EV here is just about 1%. That's more than 3 times as profitable as our all-in shove with King 8 off was, where if you remember it was 0.3% versus that all-in calling range. So with 10 big blinds, we can actually raise fold and have it be 3 times as more profitable. Now, of course, this is under the assumption that the 3 betting range is going to be similar to the all-in calling range. And before we get into how wide the player has to be to make this, a worse play than shoving all in, let's figure out how short can we be. How short can our stack be so that we can continue to raise fold, and where we get committed. Many people will think that you start getting committed when you have 10 big blinds, and as we've just showed that we don't have to call here. It's still very profitable. Can we do this with 9 big blinds? Can we do this with 8 big blinds? Can we do it with 7? So to figure that out, actually what we're going to have to do here is go through a couple calculations of analyzing the plus EV of folding versus the plus EV of calling. So let's change our stack size to 9 big blinds, 1800, and let's see if we raise fold with 9 big blinds, what that looks like. So raise folding is still quite plus EV. Now let's change this to, we're going to call now. So the reason I changed it to call is because we're trying to figure out at what point are we committed. At what point is it a really bad idea to be raising and still folding? Because there is going to be a point to where whenever we raise, we have to call the all-in because of pot odds and because it just kills our equity in the game. So let's look at what happens when we call. So remember 1.04. And you can see raise calling is 0.52, whereas again raise folding is a little over 1. So it's still extremely profitable to be raise folding even with 9 big blinds. Now instead of keep going down, I'll skip it. I'll skip to the end here. So the question is, can we do this with, let's say, a 1300 stack? So we're talking 6.5 big blinds. So if we raise with 6.5 big blinds and call, it's going to be plus EV of 1.1, and just to show you, let's just say we're going to fold instead, raise fold. You'll see it's right about even. So right at around 6.5 big blinds, what that's saying is you can actually raise fold all the way down to 6.5 big blinds, and it'd be even more profitable than raise calling. Okay, let me put this one stipulation in. I would not be raise folding down to 6.5 big blinds, because what this is doing is calculating the EV of this specific scenario and not really considering future EV. Because if you raise fold with this stack, you've really left yourself crippled for future scenarios. However, I do regularly raise fold and raise call with 10, 9, even 8 big blinds sometimes. When you start getting below that, even though this is technically plus EV at the time, you really start crippling your stack, and raise folding, I'm just not a huge fan of it. So I just wanted to illustrate though here that, look, you can do more than just shove it all in with 10 and 9 big blinds. versus an opponent, a reg, an ABC reg, who won't be 3-betting you too wide and will actually be 3-betting you with the same range he's calling it all in. And you may not know that 100% that his 3-betting range is the same as his all-in calling range, but what you have to do is, if you know that guy is a reg and he has a clue of what he's doing, that if you put yourself in that scenario, you know that you should assume very minimal fold equity, and that's the assumption that we're making, and it's a good assumption to make, because why would anybody 3-bet you wider here than they would call an all-in? It's because they think that you can raise fold here, and just, again, most people don't do that, and most people don't exploit that. It's a very tough thing to do. So that was to illustrate how wide, or sorry, how short we can be, or with what stack sizes we can start raise folding, raise calling with. Let's get back into the scenario of, let's give ourselves the 10 big blind stack. Let's illustrate some examples where the big blind is actually going to exploit us, and how wide, or what the difference is between his 3-betting range and his all-in calling range has to be to make our raise fold not a very good play and actually less profitable than the all-in. So let's get back into that scenario. Okay, so what I did was I put us back to the original scenario: King 8 off, small blind, raised to 500. The big blind is going to 3-bet shove us with, and before, if you remember, we had about a 21% 3-betting range. So we're going to get back to that range, and I think that was pretty much it. So I think Queen Jack suited might have been in there. Let's just say any ace. So regardless, we're going to make that wider. So we already said that if this is his 3-betting range, that raise folding with King 8 offsuit is 3 times as more profitable than shoving all in. Now, the reason that was because, again, the 3-betting range was similar to the all-in calling range. But what happens when that 3-betting range becomes wider than the all-in calling range? And how wide does it have to be such that it becomes a bad play or not a profitable play or negative EV play to be raise folding, raise calling, and it's better to just shove all in? So we got 21%. Let's just start adding in some hands here. So King 8 suited, Queen 9 suited, maybe put some more suited hands in here. Jack 10, King or Queen 10. We'll give them all pocket pairs. So what about 28%? This is getting a little bit wider here. So we're now we're including some worse kings, suited kings, Queen 9 suited. Maybe we'll go Queen 8 suited, Jack 10 off. So like 30%. Let's take a look at what that is going to look like. And of course we're going to still be, we don't know this yet, so we're still going to be raise folding. So even if he is 3-betting us 10% wider, pretty much close to 10% wider than he was calling the all-in, it's still 0.58% to raise fold, which is just about still 2 times as profitable than shoving all in. So let's change this up again. Now let's figure out how wide he has to be so that it pretty much equals 0.3 or less. So let's just start giving suited kings and Jack 9 and Queen 9, and I think we're right at 36%. So let's take a look at that. So you can see, so he has to be at around 36% 3-betting range for this play to pretty much equal the all-in calling range, or sorry, equal the plus EV of shoving all in. Sorry. So you have to ask yourself, is someone really going to, when you have a 10 big blind stack and they have a 10 big blind stack, are they really going to 3-bet shove your open from the small blind? I guarantee you most are not. And the only way they may is if you start doing this non-stop against them and they're paying attention and they have a note on you. I guess it could happen. But here's the thing. they can't just do it to you one time and figure that they're exploiting you. They have to consistently keep 3-betting you this wide and over a large sample for this to be, consistently a negative EV play. It might be negative EV that one time, but if you can go do it again, it's still going to be more profitable than shoving all in. So, that's the point again that I wanted to illustrate. So, let's say we don't have King 8 offsuit. And let's go back to our original range of 21% and get back to our standard. Our standard range is King 10 suited. And we're right back at like 21%. So how about we don't have King 8 off, but we have any two cards. So we have any two cards, and what I'm just going to do is I'm going to say we're going to raise fold with any two cards, because what this will show is it'll give us a chart of the hands that we can call with. So let's say we're going to raise fold with any two cards, and yep. So it's right back at that 1% range. Now let's look at what hands we should be calling with. It didn't show them. I remember from before when I did this. Here's the range we should be calling with here versus a, let me exit out of this, versus a, around a 21% 3-betting range. We can, and actually let me delete this. We're going to call with Ace-9 offsuit, Ace-8 suited. I don't think it's all pocket pairs. I believe it's just pocket threes. And let's say, actually, I think it's pocket fours. So here should be your calling range in these scenarios versus your average 3-betting range. Ace-9 offsuit, Ace-8 suited, King-Queen suited, down the pocket fours. And otherwise, we're going to fold. So if that's how you play it, you can see the EV there is 1.07%. So what's the point? The point is now when you're sitting in the small blind and you're sitting with 9 deuce offsuit or 7 deuce or whatever hand you could possibly imagine, and you're versus this type of player that's in the blinds, you can go ahead and confidently open the 2.5x and confidently raise fold and still make an extremely profitable play, because you know that you're also going to do that with pocket aces and ace-jack, and you're going to call it off, and even king-queen suited. So there's some hands you're going to be raise calling, other hands you're going to be raise folding. But this, along with all the other videos we've talked about opening up wider and stealing more chips, this will give you the confidence to not sit there and fold in the small blind and give away chips. This play will add into your repertoire of all the other plays we've talked about how to exploit players, and this is just another way to pick up chips in an extremely profitable situation. So let's get back and let's start talking about who we can do this against. I know we've talked about regs, but that's really the guys you want to start attacking are your ABC regs. So let's get back into it here. So the ideal villains, of course, we said ABC regs, and what that means is that they have an average or low VPIP and pre-flop raise, 14, 12, 16, 14, or even tighter. But the point is that one, the regs, they're not going to flat you, because that kind of blows the whole plan right to hell. And the other thing that's important, which is very important, is you want to look at their 3-bet versus steal. As I've said again in previous videos, a 3-bet versus steal that's pretty aggressive is greater than 10%. So if you have somebody that's a little bit 3-bet happy, it could make this play a little bit less profitable, but again, still have confidence that they have to be really wide for your raise fold to be worse than shoving all in. So, in an ideal scenario, that their 3-bet versus steal range or frequency is less than 10%. And, it doesn't also have to be a reg. If you see a random person there that has very nitty stats, they're perfectly fine as well. But usually you have a larger hand sample on the regs, the guys you're seeing every day, so it's easier to see stats. But, hey, if you've got an unknown guy there, a random guy, and the whole time he's playing really tight, go ahead and do this play. Now, some key concepts of what allows this to work, and of course we're going to do this against the tighter players, but the reason we're doing that is because these certain conditions need to exist. The villain is not going to flat us. The guy in the big blind is not going to flat. If they flat, it really puts us in a really bad spot, and we don't want to be in those spots. So, if you've got a random guy there playing 26-22 and he's 3-betting a lot, you don't want to be raise folding with any two cards there. Typically, you probably want to play your more sit and go whiz hands that they tell you to play in your unexploitable ranges there. And as we've said, the key concept number 2 is that the 3-betting range is not significantly different than their all-in calling range. Because if it is, that's when you might think that you're being exploited. But also have in the back of your mind that for somebody to truly exploit this type of play, they can't just do it one time and then that's it. They have to consistently keep 3-betting you with a very wide range. And I'm telling you, 95-98% of the players that are playing that you're up against are not going to be doing this. So you want to have confidence. Now, if you are concerned that you're up against a pretty solid reg and he's seen you raise fold with 10 big blinds, 9 big blinds, and you're afraid that he is 3-betting you a little bit wider, for anybody that has Hold'em Manager 2, I've been talking to a lot of people recently, and I'm still using Hold'em Manager 1 just because I like it a little bit better, but a nice stat that you can add into your HUD that may help you with figuring out if regs are exploiting you is the 3-bet versus hero stat. So maybe somebody has a 3-bet versus steal percentage of 6%, but the 3-bet versus hero is 15%. Well, that means they're 3-betting you twice as often as they normally 3-bet somebody. So maybe they do think that you're opening a little bit wider and they're 3-betting you a little bit wider. So that can give you that extra edge, and for the guys that I'm coaching that are using this stat, they love it, and it's a really good indication of players that might be 3-betting you wider. And accordingly, what you can do is you can call wider. Sometimes it's a tougher thing to do, to have the confidence to raise wide but then also call wide. The other thing you can do if somebody is 3-betting you wide is simply just tighten up a little bit so that their wide 3-betting ranges become a negative EV play for them. So you could simply just tighten up, but don't be afraid to do either one. But make sure before you start changing up your game that you're 100% positive that somebody is really exploiting you, and maybe you catch them a couple times 3-betting wide, or you do have that 3-bet versus hero stat. But it's extremely profitable to be, in most scenarios, to be raise folding or raise calling and not just shoving all in. So, in conclusion, take this concept of optimal versus EV and this raise folding with 10 or 9 big blinds and apply it to your small blind play now. Apply it to your button play. If you have 11 or 12 big blinds, do you have to shove all in? If you've got 2 guys to your left that are ultra tight with their 3-betting stats really low, go ahead and raise fold with your ace-5s, because they're probably not going to be 3-betting you much wider than they're calling it all in. And you can apply that concept to the other positions of the table and take what we talked about in video 2 about sometimes we can open up with any 2 cards from middle position given that we have tight players to our left. Just as a refresher, if you don't remember that, go back and watch the Series 2, Sit and Go Series Part 2. But these types of calculations are what also allow that to be very profitable as well, is that many times the 3-betting ranges are not going to be much wider than their all-in calling ranges. People just don't do it in sit and goes very often. So it all goes back to that optimal versus EV conditions and optimal versus EV thought process. That, don't just go into Sit and Go Wizard, plug it in, and think it's the only way you can play. To get an edge on the guys now, you can make these plays while everybody else at your table, while all the other regs are playing a push forward game. You're now getting the edge on them, and this is how you continue to maintain your edge as the games are. As I'm hearing it every day, the games are getting harder. The 180 mans are getting harder. The 18 mans are getting harder. There's more regs in these games. I agree with you. There are, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden our ROI has to shrink. It just means we have to evolve, and this is just another play to add into your game to help you evolve and get the edge over everybody else that's not adapting their game, that's still just basing everything off of Nash and ICM and Sit and Go Wizard. So there are other ways you can play, more optimal ways you can play, and when I tell people, and they, I can raise fold down to 8 or 9 big blinds, they think I'm insane. But here are the calculations I presented them to you to show that I'm not too insane. I'm just trying to look at these games in a little bit different way. And the other thing is, in conclusion, have faith. Have faith in these numbers. Have faith that these types of plays are going to be profitable. I know a lot of people that will see this video, they probably still won't add into the game because raise folding with 8 and 9 big blinds just feels stupid. It feels weird. You're not supposed to do that. You've been taught from coaches and videos and forum posts that you cannot do this. Have faith in this play. Try it out. Post some hands in the forum here at Bluefire and say, hey, is this a good spot? Give stats, and we can start analyzing it and do some calculations just like we did here. So have faith. Give it a shot. It's something that really revolutionized my game because I always took the unexploitable route, and once I started adding this type of play into my game, as well as the other plays that I've talked about in the previous videos, it gives you an extra boost, an ROI boost. I mean, we saw some plays are 3 times as more profitable. So have faith, go out there, start playing a more raise fold, raise call game. You'll see some of the better regs in your game that are doing this already. So if you want to get up there, if you want to increase stakes, if you want to bump up your ROI, start giving these plays a shot. So it's enough for me, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the 3 prior to this, and good luck at the tables.